Why did Karmelo Anthony's self-defense claim completely fail? We're going to break down the evidence using forensic psychology to think through the differences between self-defense, manslaughter, and murder. So now, let's get started.
Jurors sentenced him to 35 years in prison for the murder of Austin Metcalf.
Why do we have to care anymore? Why are we even here? To be honest, why are we here? What are we here for? Because if we take up for ourselves, we go to jail. If we don't, we die. So it's a catch-22 in this situation. What do you want us to do? That's right. What do you want us to do at this point? What? I'm lost for words. I don't know what to do. I got 5 boys. I don't know what. I ain't got nothing to tell them no more. You can't walk away no more.
On April 2nd, 2025, Austin Metcalf, a 17-year-old star athlete from Memorial High School, was with his team under his school's tent at a district track meet in Frisco, Texas. Karmelo Anthony, and this is not to be confused with the NBA star
Karmelo Anthony with the greatest scoring game in Knicks history.
Karmelo Anthony, at the time a 17-year-old star athlete from Centennial High School, quietly walked over to Austin's school's tent to sit under their tent.
They all said Karmelo was the aggressor. They all said they were sitting under the tent, and he walks up and just sits under there. Didn't say anything really to anybody. All of them said that Austin started off calmly. You know, hey, man, what's going on? You shouldn't really be here.
According to many accounts, Austin told Karmelo that he was in the wrong team's tent and needed to leave.
Not in any aggressive way. Everything was calm. And they said Karmelo was just like not responding, just saying no, or if you want me to move, you're going to have to make me move. Just, you know, being real adamant about not leaving the tent.
When Karmelo still refused to leave Memorial High School's tent, more students got involved, telling Karmelo to leave their tent numerous times.
You might walk by and see a friend that you know. You say, hey, what's up? But you're not hanging out under the tent.
I've ran track for 10 plus years, all the way up to college. You don't go in another team's area. And when you're asked to leave, you leave. And you don't bring a knife to school.
Others were chiming in. Some of the people on the witness stand, some of the students testified to that they were chiming in also. Like, what are you doing here, man? Like, and none of them said any cussing was going on.
Karmelo puts his hand in his bag as he's ordered to leave the school's tent and says, touch me and find out.
The students did admit that Austin started getting a little heated. Karmelo started getting a little heated, but then they started talking about Karmelo's hand in the bag. And then that all of them said that same thing that we've heard, Chris, the phrase, touch me and find out. Touch me and you see what happens.
Since this is Frisco, Texas, a low-crime suburban neighborhood, Austin appears to have said to Karmelo, you don't have anything in that bag, calling Karmelo's bluff.
That they would not have expected someone to bring a knife to a track meet on school grounds. Austin looked at him and said, oh, you don't have anything in that bag, like calling his bluff. Pretty much. He had his hand in the bag and thought, you don't have anything in there. We live in Frisco. You aren't going to do anything.
Yes, things got a little bit more heated and Karmelo still refused to leave their tent.
He already had his hand in the bag. You know, maybe he already realized what he wanted to do and pick a fight. So if and when Austin Metcalf shoved him in the shoulder, he just, you know, took it out really quickly. That's where the inconsistency comes in. Was it a hard push? Was it a one-handed push? Whatever it happened, they say that's when the stabbing happened so fast.
Austin appeared to have pushed or at least touched Karmelo's shoulder. Karmelo then responds by stabbing Austin in the heart with his 3.5-inch flip blade knife.
All of them said that they didn't even realize what had happened because it had happened so fast. I mean, including Austin Metcalf himself. They said when the stabbing happened, they said they looked to Austin and he was just stumbling back and he just, you know, was doing, you know, a motion like this. And then he pulled his shirt up and that's when they saw the gaping wound. But not one of them said they even saw a knife.
It was only until Austin lifted his shirt was it obvious to everyone what sadly occurred.
Student, I see the hole in his chest and blood. He starts screaming for help.
He started yelling, he got stabbed.
Austin fell down and looked unconscious.
Austin then sadly falls to the ground against the nearby fence separating the bleachers from the track.
After the stabbing, where did Karmelo go? Student, I saw him run up the bleachers.
Karmelo then runs away, throws his knife which lands on the metal bleachers.
One of those knives that could penetrate deeply if, you know, stabbed with enough force. He looks down, he's like, I found it. And then he says on his body cam, oh, that still has blood evidence and bone evidence on it. Definitely a sizable knife.
And Karmelo seems to try and get lost in the crowd, eventually getting to his school's track coach.
Coach says he looks down, he sees the blood coming through his hands, and he immediately takes his jacket off and starts, you know, applying pressure to the wound. And he says he sees, you know, the color draining from Austin's face, and eventually start seeing his eyes roll back.
Nearby coaches try performing CPR on Austin, but he sadly quickly passes away from being stabbed in the heart.
There was a 2-inch deep wound that hit the cartilage of Austin Metcalf's sternum and actually pierced one of the ventricles in his heart. So he was literally stabbed in the heart, which is likely why the CPR and life-saving efforts weren't working, because no matter how much the heart was pumping out, it was leaking, from the source.
Medical examiner, I think, straight up said something along the lines of, like, there's no way that he could have survived this. Even if he was on an operating table, like a surgeon might not have been able to save him. The wound was that bad.
Karmelo pleaded with self-defense, but was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison.
He was not an aggressor. Karmelo was not an aggressor. He was minding his damn business when the boys came up to him.
I feel that the justice system always over-respond when it comes to us. So definitely, you look at the charge. It was self-defense.
There seems to be a lot of confusion between the difference of self-defense, manslaughter, and first-degree murder. So let's clear all this up by explaining the difference between the three. Self-defense is a legal justification where someone uses necessary force to protect themselves from imminent harm. If proven, it negates criminal responsibility. Manslaughter is the unlawful killing of another human being without the intent or premeditation of murder. It may be considered voluntary in the heat of the moment or involuntary due to reckless actions. First-degree murder is the intentional and premeditated killing of another person. It involves deliberately planning or lying in wait. In short, self-defense justifies the act, manslaughter is a killing without full intent, and first-degree murder is a fully intentional and planned killing. A common misconception with first-degree murder is that the murderer needed to plan all of it well before the event.
I'm an attorney, and here are my thoughts on the Karmelo Anthony trial, specifically the first-degree murder charge. I think a lot of people think that premeditation requires some well thought out plan that takes a month to plan out. That's not true. Premeditation can be as if you planned it for even just a second. And unfortunately, what hurts Karmelo Anthony the most is when he said to Austin, "Touch me and see what happens."
The very fact that Karmelo warned Austin, "Touch me and find out," indicates that there was likely premeditation involved here. Even just 1 second of premeditation is premeditation. You don't need proof that Karmelo was sitting at home with a map of the track field plotting how he's going to get back at Austin Metcalf because he tackled him at a prior football game that they competed in.
The two teens didn't know each other and attended different schools.
And there was a lot of talk about Karmelo bringing a knife to the track meet. Yeah, that was a little weird, and also it's against school policy for him to do that. But this is also Texas. There's a lot of people who are carrying weapons and carrying weapons responsibly.
Knives under 5 inches are not illegal to carry in Texas. While they are against school policy, they are not illegal.
Also keep in mind, too, it's where Karmelo stabbed Austin. He stabbed him right in the heart. He didn't stab him in the arm. He didn't stab him in the leg. He didn't stab him, in the shoulder. He stabbed him right in the heart. Any reasonable person knows that if he stabs someone's center chest right where the heart is, they're likely gonna die. And it appears that after Karmelo did it, he became very scared of the possible consequences for those actions, which psychologically explains why he ran away and threw the knife.
Then you hear Karmelo say, "He put his hands on me. I told him not to." They radioed in, "We have the alleged suspect." Karmelo then goes, "It's not alleged, I did it."
At the time, he thought he was justified because, hey, someone touched me. That means he gets to do whatever he wants to somebody because he warned him.
The defense called one of Anthony's former teammates. He described Anthony as, quote, distraught after the stabbing, said he heard him crying and say, "I told him not to touch me."
He started to psychologically realize that maybe his idea of self-defense isn't actually legal self-defense that is going to exonerate him. Which, of course, it's not. Just because you tell someone not to touch you and they touch you doesn't mean you can do anything you want to them.
What this process did is shown that black lives do not matter in Collin County.
You keep saying that black lives don't matter, but no black lives were lost here. A 17-year-old white person was killed. So what are you talking about?
When a black person try to use those same basic rights and laws, then we're not afforded those things. We're doing those things unjustifiably.
What I know I learned today is I have to go tell my 21-year-old son. I have to continue to tell my son that was with me and witnessed it. You do not have rights to self-defense. Your life does not matter in 2026.
I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible, and it appears that many people are really confusing what self-defense really is. A big part of self-defense is called proportionality. Just because someone touches your shoulder or does anything like that after you told them, don't touch me, and they touch your shoulder, it doesn't mean that you get to do anything you want to them. It has to be proportional. If someone touches your shoulder or pushes your shoulder after you tell them not to touch you, and they do that, what's proportional? Right, to either push their shoulder or, even better, what? Just walk away, because it wasn't Karmelo's tent or area to begin with.
What is self-defense? Is self-defense not somebody touching you that you don't want touching you and you defending yourself?
Self-defense doesn't work like that. You can't stab somebody because they put their hands on you. You got to use equal force with equal force, or it's going to be considered overkill.
You know damn well Karmelo did not try to kill your son. He wanted to defend himself.
And keep in mind, none of this is legal advice, and I'm just giving you my opinion. Now let's escalate this situation hypothetically in order to figure out at what point would possibly be considered self-defense. Instead of touching his shoulder or pushing his shoulder, Austin takes both hands and just shoves him right across, and he falls down. Does that give Karmelo right to come at him with a knife and stab him in the heart? Of course not. It's not proportional. Karmelo could stand back up and try to shove him back. That's proportional. Or even better, Karmelo can just walk away.
I've heard so many variations of how hard Austin pushed him during the altercation, and none so far have warranted a knife to the chest, just gotta be honest.
Now let's do another hypothetical here. Things are getting heated in the tent, and Austin says, leave now, leave now. I'm not going to leave, Karmelo says, and Austin goes and punches him in the face. Is Karmelo allowed at that point to go and use lethal force? Two young men in a regular fist fight should not escalate to murder. Young men unfortunately get into fist fights all the time, especially with their raging testosterone, and those fist fights don't really ever end in murder. They usually just end in a black eye or a bloody nose. And in that hypothetical situation, if Karmelo was socked in the face, yeah, Karmelo may come back with his own punches at Austin, but there's no reason why a typical young male fist fight should result in using lethal force. Yeah, it's not proportional. Now, in this hypothetical situation, Austin is kicking Karmelo's ass and just beating him, and Karmelo feels like he's losing the fist fight. Should Karmelo pull out his knife and use lethal force? No, of course not. What typically happens in a young male fist fight? Not saying I condone that, just typically what would happen, right? When we have one person who wins and one person who loses. Yeah, the person who loses falls to the ground, and the person who wins stands and walks away. And even if Karmelo's on the ground with his pride at stake and all the girls are laughing at him that he got beat up by Austin, doesn't mean that Karmelo can come at Austin with lethal force. This sadly happens for both parties, where a bully treats a person very unfairly and very mean, and is very mean to them, and that person who is bullied maybe day after day after day, and that bully is making their life miserable. And although that bully, was making their life miserable by giving them, like a noogie or, flipping their books out of their arm when they're walking to class and embarrassing them and making fun of them, really terrible things, sure, but unfortunately, that person who's being bullied sometimes actually goes and uses lethal force against the bully. And although how that bully was treating that other person was not fair or nice or right at all, unfortunately, the person who was being bullied escalated everything by using lethal force, which turns out to be illegal, and they could be charged with first-degree murder. Not saying Austin was necessarily being a bully at all, not saying that, but just because someone is treating someone unfairly does not mean that the person who was on the receiving end of being treated unfairly can use lethal force against their bully. Now, in this hypothetical situation, which we're escalating here to make a point, Austin not just knocks down Karmelo and he's on the ground, but then Austin jumps on top of him and starts slugging his face, Karmelo's face. Boom, 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 boom. Now what? I would say in that situation, Karmelo could be more justified to use lethal force, especially if he felt his life was in danger. But even in a situation like that, where someone got on top of another person and started beating their face in, and that person, uses lethal force against that person who's beating their face in, even in that hypothetical situation, it will still likely go to court. It wouldn't be a perfectly clear self-defense example. The point is that someone merely touching another person on the shoulder, even after they said that they didn't want to be touched at all, does not give that person a right to kill another person.
He has to show that he could reasonably believe that it was necessary for him to use force in order to stop an imminent attack on him. And so that depends on what did he see? What did he think? What was his reasonable belief about what was to happen?
The defense rested after calling 6 witnesses and ultimately decided not to call up Karmelo Anthony to the stand to testify in his own murder trial.
Also keep in mind, the very fact that Karmelo did not leave when he had the option to leave indicates he did not believe his life was at risk. And also, no one was stopping Karmelo from leaving. He could have left. People were surrounding him and going like, you came into the wrong lines then, buddy. You're gonna pay now. There was none of that.
There was a little bit of commotion, but they all said they did not even expect a fight to happen. One girl testified, and she was at the tent next to it at Liberty High School, maybe 20, 30 feet away. She heard the argument going on, but she thought it was just boys being boys, and she went to go watch the 3,200 race. And by the time she walked down to the fence, Austin was stabbed. None of them said that they felt like anything like this was about to happen. One of them even just said they thought, okay, when Austin shoved them, maybe there would have been a shove back and, that would have been it.
The people in Memorial High School didn't grab him and okay, let's take turns at beating him. There was none of that.
Anthony was repeatedly asked to leave and that he was the aggressor. Now, one witness testified that Metcalf told Anthony, quote, "I'm not going to fight you at a track meet, dude." Another witness testified Anthony responded, "F y'all, I'm not going to leave." And later, quote, "touch me and find out."
Another big thing is you can't be the person who provokes the confrontation and then claim self-defense.
Because it's a white teen that he killed, they want him to be able to walk free. Even though he was asked to leave the tent multiple times, even though he was threatening Austin, even though he brought a knife to a track meet.
Self-defense implies that people are aggressing towards you. You can't be the aggressor towards them and then claim self-defense.
Student, Karmelo Anthony does not leave. He gets angry and tries to provoke us, saying, "Make me leave." What does he say next? Student, "F you all, I'm not going to leave. You're all a bunch of p***s." Karmelo put his hand in the bag and said 5 times, "Touch me and see what happens." He says, "You're not going to move me. You're a bitch." Student, Karmelo said, "You'll have to move me."
A person can't instigate and then escalate and then later just call it self-defense.
Centennial High School, where Karmelo Anthony went, was the only school here that did not have a tent posted up that day.
And some people claim that, hey, it was kind of rainy outside, so you should have allowed Karmelo in the tent. Karmelo is not made out of sugar. He was not going to disintegrate if he were to get a little wet. So being in another school's tent was not a life or death situation. Another thing people talk about is size. Austin was a little bit bigger than Karmelo. Does that matter? What do you think?
Does Austin have a bigger build? Student, yeah, he's more broad.
It would matter a little bit if Austin was severely hurting Karmelo at that moment and Karmelo felt his life was in danger, such as if he was being choked out and then he really felt that he was going to die. However, just being touched or pushed on the shoulder is not severe physical violence where Karmelo would be fearing for his life, especially when Karmelo can just walk away. I think there was one photo of Karmelo's height being around 6 foot, and then the first day I heard he was like 5'10", second day he was 5'9", third day he was 5'8", fourth day, he was 5'7". So the commentators and influencers seem to be shrinking Karmelo's height 1 inch every day. And of course, the defense shaved his head and probably put him on a little bit of a diet so that he can come across to the jury as very, very small and meek, almost like a little boy.
They put him in a big suit, an oversized suit, so he looks diminutive.
However, they were both in shape high school football players of the same age.
Now, according to local reports, 3 African-American women were stricken from the jury, claiming they had bias in the case, claiming they didn't want to convict Karmelo Anthony.
If evidence shows that he did not, no, we're going to stand by ours regardless. They stand by theirs.
All right, time out. Maybe that's why ain't no black jurors. Maybe that's why no black jurors are on the jury team. Maybe that's why it's done.
After raising nearly $500,000, the Anthony family has now officially, this is not allegedly, made a statement as far as where that money is going to go. While legal defense is a critical part of this journey, we want to make it clear that this fund is not solely dedicated to legal expenses. No. The funds raised will also support a range of urgent and necessary needs that have emerged as a result of this situation, including, but not limited to, key phrase, the safe relocation of the Anthony family. New home? Not too shabby.
That's the family. I gotta put y'all from my city. Hey, hold up. I got to. It's my Baton Rouge people, man. We love Karmelo. My Baton Rouge people. My Baton Rouge people. Hey.
Free Karmelo! Free Karmelo! Free Karmelo!
Hey, we glad Austin dead. I'm glad Austin is dead.
And I think what we can all agree on is that the judge should have allowed cameras and audio recording in the courtroom. It is absolutely ridiculous that a high-profile, controversial court case like this did not have cameras in the courtroom to show what exactly happened.
Austin's mother, Megan, said, quote, "My son was murdered. He didn't just die. He was taken from us just as he was starting to live." She turned her attention directly to Anthony and said, "You should feel lucky because I've been sentenced to a life without my son." Austin's father, Jeff, said, quote, "We were robbed. If you ask me what my son's death did to me, I would tell you it destroyed the person I used to be."
Now in the comments, what do you think about the verdict of first-degree murder and 35 years in prison for Karmelo Anthony? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. See you next time.